Welcome back, artists. Today we're going to be practicing stitching. I'm going to show you how to thread a needle, how to use a variety of different kinds of stitches, and what to do when you make a mistake with your stitching. We will need the following things today. You're going to need a needle. It's a plastic needle, but you want to make sure that you're using it appropriately today in class. You're going to need a piece of yarn or string. And you're going to need a birdie, which is like a small piece of paper that's going to help us thread our needle. So I have my needle, my thread, and my birdie, which is a small piece of paper that's going to help us thread the needle. I call it a birdie because I like to pretend that it's a birdie's beak, and that my string is the worm. So the bird's going to eat the worm towards the end of the string. I'm going to take the beak and I'm going to send it through the eye or the hole in the needle, okay? And then I'm going to pull the string all the way through. And then I can get rid of my beak. It's really helpful if you tie your yarn onto your needle. So I'm going to make a loop here. I'm going to tuck the tail end of the yarn underneath and pull it through the middle of that hole. I'm going to pull it tight, pull either ends. It's also helpful to have a knot towards the end of your yarn, so I'm going to make another loop, tuck the tail end of my loop, and pull it through the center of my hole. And if you want to maybe do it again, that might be helpful. This is going to keep our yarn in place when we're stitching. The first stitch I'm going to show you is called the running stitch. It's a simple above, below, above, below, above, below stitch. And since I have my needle threaded and I have knots on either end of my yarn, I'm going to be stitching on this piece of Wonder Foam or this piece of Styrofoam today. You'll notice I have dots here that are going to tell me where I should put my needle. I'm going to start by coming from below and up through that first hole. When you're stitching, you need to pull your yarn all the way through every time you make a stitch, and you'll notice that my yarn stops because I have a knot there. I'm then going to poke below, and go down below, and then I'm going to come back above, and then back below. Above, and finally back below. You'll notice that the running stitch is just a simple dashed line like this. That's the running stitch. The next stitch I'm going to show you is called the back stitch. And we're going to first start by just doing the regular running stitch. So I'm going to come from below, so you'll notice I'm going to go back in the opposite direction that I just came to fill in these dashed spaces. So I'm going to go back and fill in the areas here. So I'm going to come back below through this hole, fill that, go below ground, below ground. That is the back stitch. The next stitch I'm going to show you is called the elaborated running stitch. It's essentially just adding on to the running stitch I just did. So I have a new color piece of string. My needle is threaded and I have knots on either end. I'm going to start by coming through this first same hole. And we're just going to be weaving in and out of my running stitch. So I'm going to start by going in this direction. I'm going to make almost like a wave pattern. And then I'm going to send my needle back in this direction through the next stitch. So you'll see here. And then I'm going to go back in this direction. That's the elaborated running stitch. The next stitch I'm going to show you is called the couch stitch. You're going to need 2 pieces of yarn for this stitch. I like to use a string and I'll just double it up. So I just folded it over a few times and we're going to actually stitch on either side of this doubled up yarn. So I have my needle threaded and my knots on either end. And I'm going to come from below here. And I'm just going to stitch on either end of this doubled up yarn, keeping it in place. That's the couch stitch. If you make a mistake while you're working with your yarn, there are 3 things you could try doing. The first thing is if you make a mistake while you're stitching, for instance, the running stitch isn't supposed to look like that. It's supposed to be a dashed line. So instead of continue going, I'm just going to reverse my needle. So I'm going to send my needle back through same hole I came in and undo it. If you have a really big knot and you've tried reversing your needle and it's just not working, you can simply cut your yarn off, okay, and just start where you stopped. So I will tie a knot. You could even tie this actually to the end of your yarn if you wanted to. Especially if you run out of yarn, that's something that you should do. And then you can just continue stitching.